This is the story of a band in transition and a tragic, almost career-ending accident that significantly contributed to the creation of a pivotal album on the journey to transformation. Few albums carry with them a story so poignant and emotionally resonant as Blonde Redhead's Misery is a Butterfly. The music itself, to the listener, is an exploration of hidden inner depths. This ethereal masterpiece isn't just an auditory journey, it's a testament to the resilience of human spirit in the wake of adversity and tragedy. And I'll get to that as we delve into the more intricate moments of this record. We'll uncover the band's evolution, the harrowing event that shaped this album's creation, and the profound impact it's had on listeners worldwide. To understand the genesis of Misery is a Butterfly, we must first explore the origins of the band itself and its lead up to the album. Formed in 1993 in New York City, Blonde Redhead emerged from the avant-garde scene with a distinct blend of art rock and noisy experimentalism. The band takes their name from a song on no wave artist DNA's 1981 EP, A Taste of DNA. One of my favorite early singles by the group is this from 1994. It's for the songs Vague and Jetstar. So definitively 90s art rock, and the sound that the band kind of encompassed in their early days, perfect. Consisting of Kazu Makino on vocals and rhythm guitar, and Italian-born twin brothers Amadeo vocals and lead guitar, and Simone drums. The trio was originally four, with Maki Takahashi on bass, though she left shortly after the group's 1995 self-titled release dropped, replaced by her friend Toko Yasuda. Yasuda would appear on the 1995 album La Mia Via Violenta, but would also leave after its release. So for nearly 25 years thereafter, Blonde Redhead has continued as a three-piece band. The two albums from 1995 were released on New York-based label Smells Like. There's nothing after that, just Smells Like. After that, the band made a move to Touch and Go Records. Fake Can Be Just As Good was released in 1997, and In an Expression of the Inexpressible in 1998. Both of these albums leaned further into the art rock and experimentalism of the band's first two LPs, and that brings us to the year 2000. And side note, do you ever notice that? Like, I don't know what it is, but I can't just say 2000. I have to say the year 2000. Anyways, Melody of Certain Damaged Lemons saw the band taking a step back and kind of toning things down and moving away from a lot of the artsy, experimental, avant-garde elements that came before. Outside of the track Mother, which was really loud and obnoxious. Melody is phenomenal, but it also marked an ending of an era, signaled the further transition that would soon come. 5 albums across 6 years, after which the band took a pause, and there's good reason for that. And we'll get to that in just a moment. After the split from Touch and Go, Blonde Redhead decided to finance their next album themselves. Simone noted they, quote, didn't want to have any kind of limits with what they wanted to do as far as expenses. With Touch and Go, sometimes things were a little tight. So it had more to do with budget than artistic differences, it appears. Though with a more restrictive budget, as hinted at, artistic creativity can certainly be stifled. They found themselves in this interesting spot. An experimental band once hindered by budgetary limitations, now free to explore in new directions. Yet that exploration didn't lead to more erratic, more avant-garde, and more experimental sounds. But free of the constraints, they were able to remake themselves as a butterfly from a cocoon, to use a completely obvious metaphor. On their own, sans label, the band stepped into the studio. No representation behind them. No real plan to shop for a label until all was said and done. Departing from their earlier experimental soundscapes, the band embraced elements of shoegaze and dream pop. Collaborating with producer Guy Picciotto of Fugazi fame, they'd worked with Guy before, but this was a different experience. Ripe with vulnerability, moody with high acknowledgement of humanity and mortality, and once again, for good reason. Born 1969, Makino turned 35 in 2004, and the Pace twins, born 63, turned 40 the year before. Now cemented in middle age or just at the cusp of it, a sense of mortality and maturity tends to creep in. And you can see that here. No longer are they the sprite young 20-somethings who formed a band just over a decade earlier. And then there's the mortality of facing death. For that, we step back further, prior to writing and recording, all the way to 2002. Atop the liner notes on the inner sleeve of the record is written the following. Kazu thanks Dr. Naiman and Dr. Malpaso for putting her back in one piece, and her friends who fed her and looked after her and cheered her up when she couldn't do much on her own. In 2002, Kazu Makino was riding a horse, supposedly in Italy. On this trek, the horse became spooked and she was thrown from the saddle, only to be trampled by the horse immediately thereafter. Makino sustained severe, life-threatening injuries to her face. Many of the bones in her face were crushed and she could barely move. Her jaw had to be wired shut. Recovery was not easy, taking several months and filled with physical and mental traumas. Stereogum notes, quote, "The injuries she suffered were monumental. Half of her face was disfigured, the hoof slamming far enough in to make an impression on her brain. And she required complete facial reconstruction." Yet Makino was resilient. "I wasn't even sad or suffering. I was just struggling to write good songs," Makino said. "I could barely move, but we even tried not to cancel our shows when I had my mouth wired. I asked Amadeo if he could sing my songs or if we could play them as instrumentals. My only thought was, how can we play?" The biggest struggle in all of it wasn't the trauma of the injuries she sustained, but her inability to write, to play, to perform, and perhaps, most of all, to sing. In fact, the extent of her injuries was so severe, she had to completely relearn how to do that. Confined to a bed for recovery, be it in a hospital or at home, and barely able to move, one is forced to look inward and face themselves. Her desire to write and her desire to create and play and all of these things, what remained during all of this time, the only thing that remained was her passion for all of that, and she couldn't do it. The inability to move forward because of her injuries in itself was a trauma. There was questions as to whether she'd ever sing again. States Makino, quote, "When I got the wires out, I thought I could just bite into an apple," she said, "but I lost the muscles in my mouth, so that even though I didn't have the wires, I still felt like it. When I did get to eat an apple, I think I cried." Elephant Woman opens the album with a not-so-subtle reference to the Elephant Man. There are a few adaptations of the story, the first being based on the life of Joseph Merrick, who lived in London in the late 19th century. Directed by David Lynch and produced by Mel Brooks, and released in 1980, with another released in 1982 by the same name. Neither of these are to be confused with the widely known movie from 1985 titled Mask and starring Eric Stoltz as Rocky Dennis, though parallels do exist. And of course, you'll remember Cher was in that as well. This life-threatening incident not only tested Makino's physical resilience, but also became a wellspring of inspiration for the band's upcoming album. Stereogum noted in a ranking of Blonde Redhead's albums, it wasn't until the band moved labels again, this time with 4AD, where they are currently signed, of course this is a little bit older, that guttural meant showing your insides. Beyond opener Elephant Woman, Equus 2 delves into the aftermath of Makino's trampling, channeling her harrowing experience into a haunting sonic masterpiece. Within Misery is a Butterfly is a true desperation, a push to break free from the forced confines of a hospital bed, free from the torturous confines of one's own mind, and free from the budgetary constraints of a label without much budget to give. A track that's always resonated with me lyrically is the gutting piece Falling Man. In it, Pace sings, "I am what I am, and what I am is who I am. I know what I know, and all I know is that I fell. If only I could walk through the wall, then maybe I could tell you who I was." If you've ever gone deep inside yourself and looked inward at times of great desperation, there's no way this song won't resonate with you. When you're going deep through that shit, you desperately want to, as Pace notes, walk through the wall. But it's the actual dismantling and breaking through that wall, and that's never easy. That's where that growth is. It requires you to really break through it, which sucks and hurts. And that's when you start really knowing who you are. And that, too, is such a great metaphor for not only misery as a butterfly, breaking free of that cocoon, and the deep, deep pain and anguish that experience puts on you, but also just the beauty that comes thereafter, the strength, the growth, the self-awareness. And you get that right here on Misery as a Butterfly. This album is packed with this level of introspective depth. That to the extent which Blonde Redhead had never really explored before, and to their credit, it made the band even better than before. Hard to say, given many of their earlier works, which I've mentioned, still resonate as favorites to this day. Misery found a welcome home on 4AD. The sound Blonde Redhead created here meshes nicely with the likes of label bands like the Cocteau Twins and Lush. In 2004, not many were leaning into the dreamier side of things in indie rock. It was ripe with garage rock and kind of the tail end of the Britpop heyday. As Amadeo notes in an article published in 2023 in The Guardian, quote, "We were listening to lots of French music, lots of soundtracks at the time. What was going on in the music world was very different from what we were doing. The alt scene was then full of garage rock and dance punk, but we decided to be true to ourselves." End quote. Makino originally hated the album, as in hated it the moment it was done, but that would not last long. She chimes in as the Guardian article continues, quote, "I hate music that is simply pretty," she says, but Serge Gainsbourg wrote insanely beautiful music that was brutal at the same time because of his suffering. Blonde Redhead's new sound was similarly affecting. The cacophony of their earlier records now absent, but their signature longing, introspection, and anguish hauntingly intact. End quote. The band would find acclaim and success with Misery as a Butterfly, with Elephant Woman and Equus, which I mentioned before, notably receiving airplay on alternative and indie college radio stations. It's been 20 years since Misery as a Butterfly, and it remains a prominent piece in my extensive record collection, one that gets replayed quite often. It's an album that joins the ranks only a few others have in my personal connection that I have with it. It has moved me. It has comforted me when all seems hopeless. It has helped me grow during times of monumental inner strife, pushing through the wall, as Pace so eloquently puts it in Falling Man. It's been my soundtrack on solitary moments when I need to catch a break, on countless bike rides and car drives, and it's moved me physically as well, joining me on the road trip from my home in Washington State to my new home in Texas. In good times and bad, Misery is a Butterfly has been at my side, an album that shows that whatever terrible things are happening and I'm experiencing, well, it can all lead to more beauty and a more beautiful life, even if all seems hopeless in the moment. And it's a welcome reminder of how far you've come when the times are good. How does Misery is a Butterfly stack up for you in Blonde Redhead's collective works? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Next, dig into my initial thoughts and my vinyl unboxing of Sit Down for Dinner, the band's 2023 LP, which was my #1 album of that year. I got the Levitation pressing on Parfait Splatter vinyl. You'll want to check that one out for sure. As one commenter noted many moons ago, this dude is a damn nerd. I'm Andy, this is the FensePost Vinyl channel, and I'll see you in the next video.